You're having a conversation. Everything seems normal, but something feels off. Maybe they're talking faster than usual. Maybe they just gave you way too much information for a simple question. Your brain is picking up on something, but you can't quite name it. Here's the thing. Liars don't just tell bad stories. They speak a different language entirely. And once you learn to hear it, you can't unhear it. Most people think lying is about spotting nervousness or avoiding eye contact. That's what TV taught us. But actual research on deception tells a completely different story. Liars reveal themselves through patterns in their words, not their bodies. The pauses they take, the details they add, the way they distance themselves from their own lives without even realizing it. Today, we're breaking down the 5 linguistic patterns that separate truth from fiction. These aren't party tricks or pseudoscience. This is what investigators, psychologists, and interrogation experts actually look for when someone's story doesn't add up. Because the truth, it has a sound, and so does lying. Let's decode it. And if you want more psychology breakdowns that actually make sense of human behavior, subscribe to that stoic stick. We cut through the noise and give you the real patterns behind how people think, speak, and operate. 1. The overcompensation tell. Picture this. You ask your friend where they were last night. A true answer sounds like, I was at home watching Netflix. A lie sounds like, oh man, so I got home around 7:30, maybe 7:45. Traffic was crazy on the 405, and I made myself some pasta, the penne, not spaghetti. And then I settled in and watched that new series everyone's talking about. The one with the detective started around 8:15, I think. Watched 3 episodes back to back. Notice the difference? The liar gave you a full itinerary. The truth teller gave you a sentence. This is called the overcompensation tell, and it's one of the most reliable linguistic markers of deception. When people lie, they instinctively believe that more detail equals more believability. So they pile on information, thinking they're building a bulletproof story. But what they're actually doing is building a cage made of details that don't matter. Here's why this happens. When you recall something true, your brain is pulling from memory. It's effortless. You don't need to convince anyone because you're not convincing yourself first. But when you fabricate, you're constructing a narrative in real time, and construction requires blueprints. Liars add excessive detail because they're trying to make the fake memory feel real to you and to themselves. Researchers call this strategic elaboration. The liar believes that specificity creates credibility. If they can tell you exactly what kind of pasta they made, surely they must be telling the truth, right? Wrong. Truth is casual. Truth doesn't try that hard. But here's where it gets interesting. The details liars add are almost always irrelevant. They're not advancing the story. They're decorating it. That's the giveaway. When someone tells you the traffic was bad, what kind of pasta they cooked, and the exact time they started watching TV, none of that answers where they were. It just fills space. It creates the illusion of transparency while actually saying nothing substantial. There's also a psychological component here called cognitive load. Lying is mentally expensive. Your brain is running multiple programs simultaneously, creating the false narrative, monitoring your delivery, watching for reactions, suppressing the truth. That's exhausting. So liars often front-load their stories with excessive detail early on, then taper off as cognitive fatigue sets in. The beginning of their story is rich with specifics. The end is vague and rushed. Truth maintains consistent detail throughout because there's no cognitive load. You're just remembering. Now, let's be clear. Not everyone who gives detailed answers is lying. Some people are naturally verbose. Some are anxious and overshare. This is why you can't use overcompensation as a standalone indicator. But when it appears alongside other linguistic patterns, it's a strong signal. The practical takeaway? When you suspect someone might be lying, pay attention to which details they emphasize. Are they giving you information that actually matters, or are they painting scenery? Are they answering the question, or are they building atmosphere? Truth is efficient. It gets to the point. Lies meander because the liar is buying time, filling silence, and hoping that somewhere in the avalanche of irrelevant detail, you'll stop questioning them. They're performing credibility instead of simply being credible. And here's the kicker. Liars often don't realize they're doing this. It's not a conscious strategy. It's a psychological reflex. The brain knows it's lying, so it compensates by overproducing. It's like someone who laughs too hard at their own joke. The effort to seem natural actually makes them seem less natural. So next time someone gives you way more information than you asked for, don't just accept it as helpfulness. Ask yourself, why are they working this hard to convince me? What question are they actually avoiding by answering questions I didn't ask? Because the language of lying isn't just about what people say, it's about how much they say when they shouldn't need to say anything at all. 2. The distancing effect. Liars have a tell that's almost invisible, but once you see it, you'll catch it everywhere. They distance themselves from their own lies using language. Not physically, linguistically. They subconsciously create space between themselves and the false narrative they're telling. And they do it with tiny word choices that seem meaningless but reveal everything. Here's what it sounds like in practice. Someone who's telling the truth says, "I didn't take your money." Someone who's lying says, "I didn't take the money." Notice what disappeared? The word "your." That one word removal creates psychological distance. The liar doesn't want to attach themselves to the crime, so they depersonalize it. The money is just money. Your money makes it real, specific, and ties them emotionally to what they're denying. This is called linguistic distancing, and it happens because lying creates psychological discomfort. When you fabricate something, part of your brain knows it's false. So to reduce that discomfort, you unconsciously separate yourself from the lie. You create verbal distance as a coping mechanism. It's your psyche trying to protect itself from the cognitive dissonance of saying something you know isn't true. Let's look at more examples. A truthful person says, "My car broke down." A liar says, "That car broke down," or just, "The car broke down." Possessive pronouns disappear. Why? Because claiming ownership of something in a lie makes the lie feel heavier. My creates intimacy. That creates separation. The liar wants to tell the story without fully inhabiting it. Passive voice is another distancing technique. Truth says, "I forgot to call you." Lies say, "The call didn't happen," or "It slipped my mind." Notice how the liar removed themselves as the active agent. They're not the one who forgot. The call just didn't happen. It's nobody's fault. It's a passive occurrence. Passive voice diffuses responsibility and creates the illusion that events unfolded independently of the liar's choices. Then there's third-person distancing. This is rarer but incredibly telling when it appears. Someone accused of wrongdoing might say, "That's not something I would do," instead of, "I didn't do that." They're talking about themselves as a character, not as a present participant. They're describing their identity rather than denying the action directly. It's a rhetorical sidestep that feels like a denial, but isn't technically one. Researchers have studied this extensively in criminal interrogations, and the pattern holds. Guilty suspects use fewer first-person pronouns than innocent ones. They say the victim instead of using the person's name. They say that night instead of when I was there. Every word choice is a small act of emotional retreat. But here's what makes this so psychologically fascinating. Liars aren't doing this strategically. They're not sitting there thinking, "I should use passive voice to sound less guilty." It's automatic. The discomfort of lying triggers an unconscious linguistic shift. The brain is essentially trying to tell the lie without taking full ownership of it. It's self-protection happening at the level of grammar. This is also why written lies are often more detectable than spoken ones. When you write, you have time to edit, and your brain's distancing mechanisms show up even more clearly. Emails, texts, statements, they're gold mines for spotting linguistic distancing because the person had time to construct their language and their subconscious patterns became even more pronounced. Now, the caveat. Some people naturally use more formal or detached language. Cultural background, education, personality, all of this affects speech patterns. So you can't convict someone based on pronouns alone. But when someone's normal language suddenly shifts under pressure, when their casual I and my become formal thee and that, that's when you pay attention. The language of lying isn't just about adding details. Sometimes it's about removing connection. It's about telling a story while pretending you're not in it. 3. The pause that screams. Silence is supposed to be empty. But when someone's lying, silence is the loudest thing in the room. Ask someone a simple question they should know the answer to instantly. Did you cheat on the test? If they're innocent, the response is immediate. No, no thinking, no processing. Just an automatic denial because the truth doesn't require computation. But if they're guilty, there's a pause, a micro-hesitation, a tiny delay where their brain is doing work it shouldn't need to do. That pause, that's the sound of fabrication. Here's what's happening in those milliseconds. When you tell the truth, you're retrieving information from memory. It's a single cognitive step. Your brain accesses the memory and outputs it as language. Fast, automatic, effortless. But when you lie, you're running a multi-step operation. First, you have to suppress the true answer. Then you have to construct a false answer. Then you have to check if that false answer is believable, consistent with previous statements, and unlikely to be contradicted by evidence. That's 3 cognitive processes happening in sequence, and each one takes time. Psychologists call this response latency, and it's one of the most reliable physiological markers of deception. The delay isn't huge. We're talking milliseconds to a couple seconds, but it's detectable, and more importantly, it's inappropriate. When someone hesitates before answering a question, they should be able to answer instantly. That hesitation is information. But here's where it gets more nuanced. Not all pauses mean the same thing. There are different types of hesitations, and they reveal different psychological processes. There's the pre-answer pause, the delay before they start speaking. This usually indicates they're constructing the lie from scratch. Their brain needs a moment to build the narrative before they can deliver it. Then there's the mid-sentence hesitation. They start talking, then pause awkwardly in the middle of their answer. This often means they've realized their initial lie doesn't work, and they're course-correcting in real time. They're improvising, adjusting the story as they go. There's also the and overload. Excessive filler words aren't just nervousness. They're cognitive stalling tactics. The brain needs time to process the next part of the fabrication, so it fills the space with verbal placeholders. Truth flows. Lies stutter. And then there's the most telling pause of all, the one that comes after you ask a clarifying question. Someone tells you a story. You ask them to repeat a specific detail. If they're telling the truth, they repeat it immediately, often with slight variation in wording, but consistent in content. If they're lying, there's a delay. Why? Because they have to remember what they said the first time. They're not pulling from memory, they're pulling from the script they just invented. And accessing that script takes effort. Research from neuroscience backs this up. Brain imaging studies show that lying activates the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for executive function and decision-making, significantly more than truth-telling. Truth activates memory regions. Lies activate planning regions. Your brain is literally working harder when you lie, and that extra work manifests as delays in response time. But here's the critical piece. Baseline matters. Some people are naturally slow speakers. Some people pause to think even when telling the truth. This is why interrogators establish a baseline first. They ask neutral questions where there's no incentive to lie, and they measure normal response times. Then, when they ask the critical question, they watch for deviations from that baseline. If someone who's been answering quickly suddenly takes 3 seconds to respond to a yes or no question, that gap is meaningful. The pause isn't just silence. It's their brain screaming that something's wrong. So when you're listening to someone's story, don't just listen to their words. Listen to the space between the words, because sometimes the silence says more than the sentence ever could. Truth doesn't hesitate. It just is. 4. The baseline break. Here's the problem with most lie detection advice. It assumes everyone lies the same way. Touch your nose, avoid eye contact, fidget with your hands. These so-called universal tells are mostly garbage. Why? Because people aren't universal. Everyone has their own normal. And the key to catching a lie isn't spotting generic behaviors. It's spotting when someone breaks their own pattern. This is called baseline deviation, and it's how actual professionals detect deception. They don't walk into an interrogation with a checklist of lying behaviors. They spend the first part of the conversation figuring out how you normally speak, move, and behave. Then they watch for changes. Think of it like a doctor taking your vital signs. Your resting heart rate might be 60 beats per minute. Mine might be 75. Neither is wrong. They're just our individual baselines. But if your heart rate suddenly jumps to 110 for no apparent reason, that's significant. Not because 110 is universally abnormal, but because it's abnormal for you. The same logic applies to speech patterns. Some people naturally talk fast. Some people are slow and deliberate. Some use lots of hand gestures. Some sit perfectly still. None of these traits indicate lying by themselves. But when someone who normally talks fast suddenly slows down, or someone who's usually animated suddenly goes rigid, that shift is the tell. Let's make this concrete. Say you're talking to someone who's naturally expressive. They use their hands when they talk. They make strong eye contact. They speak in full, flowing sentences. That's their baseline. Now you ask them a sensitive question, and suddenly their hands drop to their sides. Their eye contact breaks. Their sentences become clipped and mechanical. That's a baseline break. Something triggered a shift in their behavior, and that something is usually stress, the stress of lying. Here's another example. Someone who normally gives short, direct answers suddenly starts rambling. Or someone who's been relaxed and conversational suddenly becomes formal and rigid. These shifts don't mean they're definitely lying, but they mean something changed internally. Their cognitive state shifted, and their language shifted with it. This is why poker players spend so much time studying opponents before making big calls. They're not looking for universal tells. They're building a baseline for each player. How do they act when they have a strong hand? How do they act when they're bluffing? The pattern only becomes visible when you know what normal looks like for that specific person. FBI interrogators use this technique extensively. They start with casual conversation, neutral topics where there's no reason to lie. What did you have for breakfast? How was traffic? They're not interested in the answers. They're interested in how you answer, your rhythm, your word choice, your comfort level. Once they've mapped your baseline, they shift to the real questions and watch for deviations. But here's what makes baseline deviation so powerful. It accounts for personality, culture, and context. An introverted person might avoid eye contact naturally. That's not deception. That's just who they are. But if that same person suddenly becomes overly intense with eye contact during a specific question, that's a deviation. The behavior itself isn't the issue. The change is the issue. This is also why it's so hard to catch lies in strangers or one-off interactions. You don't have a baseline. You don't know if their nervousness is because they're lying or because they're naturally anxious. You don't know if their detailed answers mean they're overcompensating or if they're just thorough people. Without a baseline, you're guessing. The practical application? If you want to know if someone's lying, don't rely on TV crime show tricks. Pay attention to how they normally communicate. Build a mental baseline. Then watch for breaks in that pattern. When their language, tone, energy, or behavior suddenly shifts, that's when you start asking better questions. Because lies aren't revealed by universal signs. They're revealed by personal contradictions, by breaks in the pattern that only exist when you know what the pattern is. 5. The truth about truth. Let's get uncomfortable for a second. You're probably terrible at detecting lies. We all are. Research shows that most people perform at about 54% accuracy when trying to spot deception. Barely better than a coin flip. Police officers, judges, therapists, people who should be experts, they're not much better. Some studies show they're actually worse because overconfidence makes them stop questioning their assumptions. This is the truth about truth detection. It's hard. way harder than Netflix crime dramas make it look. And most of what you think you know about catching liars is wrong. The big lie we've been sold is that liars have obvious tells. They look away, they touch their face, they get defensive. But actual research paints a different picture. In controlled studies, there's almost no correlation between these behaviors and deception. Some liars do these things. Some don't. Some truth tellers do them too. The behaviors are noise, not signal. Here's why we're so bad at this. We're pattern-seeking machines living in a world with inconsistent patterns. We want lie detection to be simple, a checklist we can follow. But human behavior is messy. Context matters. Personality matters. Stress, anxiety, cultural background, neurodivergence. All of this affects how people communicate, and none of it maps cleanly onto liar or truth teller. There's also something called the truth bias. Most people default to believing others because society functions on trust. If we questioned everyone constantly, social interaction would collapse. So our brains are wired to accept information unless given strong reason not to. This bias makes us easy to deceive, but also makes civilization possible. It's a feature, not a bug, just an inconvenient one when you actually need to catch a lie. Then there's the opposite problem, the Othello error. This comes from the Shakespeare play where Othello interprets his wife's fear as guilt when she's actually just afraid of being falsely accused. Innocent people can display all the signs of lying, nervousness, inconsistency, defensive behavior, simply because being accused is stressful. If you're using behavioral cues to detect lies, you're going to wrongly convict a lot of anxious, honest people. So what actually works? Here's the reality. The most reliable deception detection isn't about reading body language or micro-expressions. It's about strategic questioning and fact-checking. Ask open-ended questions. Let people tell their story without interruption. And then ask them to tell it again in reverse chronological order. Liars struggle with this because they've memorized a script in forward order. Reversing it taxes their cognitive load and creates contradictions. Ask for specific details, then circle back to those details later in unexpected ways. Truth remains consistent because it's memory. Lies degrade and contradict because they're improvisation. Compare their story against verifiable facts. This sounds obvious, but it's the most effective method we have. Behavioral cues are probabilistic. Facts are binary. Either their story matches the evidence or it doesn't. Another effective technique: increase cognitive load. Ask them to maintain eye contact while telling their story, or have them complete a secondary task while answering questions. Lying requires mental resources. When you tax those resources, lies fall apart. Truth holds because truth is effortless. But even with all these techniques, you're still not going to achieve certainty. Professional interrogators with training and experience still get it wrong. Polygraph tests, often called lie detectors, are inadmissible in most courts because they're unreliable. Even brain imaging technology hasn't cracked this problem. The uncomfortable conclusion: perfect lie detection might not be possible. Humans are too complex, context is too variable, and the stakes are too high to rely on shortcuts. So what's the takeaway? Be skeptical of your own certainty. When you think someone's lying, ask yourself, Am I reading actual deception? Or am I reading stress, personality, or my own biases? Question your confidence. Seek evidence, not confirmation of what you already suspect. Because the hardest truth about detecting lies is this: the person most likely to deceive you is yourself into thinking you know more than you actually do. So there it is, the language of lying decoded. 5 patterns that separate fabrication from truth. The overcompensation tell, where liars bury you in irrelevant details. The distancing effect, where they linguistically remove themselves from their own story. The pause that screams, those micro-hesitations that reveal cognitive strain. The baseline break, where deviations from normal behavior matter more than universal tells. And the truth about truth, that detecting lies is harder than we want it to be. And certainty is usually an illusion. Here's what you do with this information. Don't turn into a paranoid lie detector, interrogating everyone around you. That's exhausting, and it'll ruin your relationships. But do pay attention. Listen not just to what people say, but how they say it. Notice the patterns. Notice the breaks in those patterns. And most importantly, stay humble about what you think you know, because the real power isn't in catching every lie. It's in understanding that communication is layered, that words carry more than their literal meaning, and that human behavior, even deceptive behavior, follows psychological rules we can learn to recognize. The language of lying exists. You've now heard it. But so does the language of truth. Anxiety, stress, personality, and 1,000 other things people don't say out loud. Your job isn't to become a human polygraph. It's to become a better listener, more aware, more thoughtful about the gap between what people say and what they mean. If this breakdown gave you a new lens on human behavior, do 2 things. Drop a comment and tell me which linguistic pattern you've noticed in real life, and subscribe to that Stoic Stick so you don't miss the next deep dive into psychology that actually matters. We're cutting through the noise and getting to what's real. Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and remember, even silence speaks if you know how to listen.